10 biggest drug seizures of all time. To all the Breaking Bad enthusiasts out there, today's video is for you. Drug seizures have always been part and parcel of every economy, with drug cartels and the legalization of countless drugs in many countries. Drug use, whether for recreational purposes or others, has increased tenfold. In the United States, drug seizures result from law enforcement efforts to reduce illegal drug trafficking. Drug seizures may involve drug-related arrests, confiscation of drugs and drug paraphernalia, and forfeiture of property used in connection with the drug trade. In 2012, the Drug Enforcement Administration, or DEA, reported over 31,000 drug seizures in the United States, resulting in more than 1.9 million kilograms of marijuana, over 400,000 kilograms of cocaine, and over 7,000 kilograms of heroin. Sounds exciting, doesn't it? So without further ado, let's jump straight into the top 10 drug seizures of all time. At number 10, we have Operation Mosel, where 90 tons of marijuana were seized in Mexico in 2006. Mexican authorities have been waging a deadly battle against drug cartels for over a decade, but with limited success. Thousands of Mexicans, including politicians, students, and journalists, die in the conflict yearly. The country had seen more than 360,000 homicides since 2006, when the government declared war on the cartels. Similarly, Operation Mosel was a major drug bust conducted by the Mexican army in 2006. It resulted in the seizure of 90 tons of marijuana, worth an estimated $500 million. The operation was conducted in Michoacan and involved a joint effort between the Mexican Army, federal police, and the Mexican Navy. It was the largest drug bust in Mexico's history at the time, and is credited with disrupting the operations of big drug cartels in the region. At number 9, we have Operation Red Sea, where 57 tons of hashish was seized in the Mediterranean in 2004. The Mediterranean Sea is particularly affected by illicit trafficking in drugs. Italy's Public Security Department of the Ministry of the Interior is responsible for all initiatives to prevent and combat illicit drug trafficking in Italy, and is also entrusted with planning and coordinating sea activities. In the last few years, international rules have been drawn up to facilitate intervention at sea and standardize control procedures. In 2004, the Italian Navy, in conjunction with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, conducted a major maritime operation in the Mediterranean Sea that resulted in the seizure of 57 tons of hashish. The operation, dubbed Operation Red Sea, was coordinated by the Italian Navy's Task Force 425. The hashish was discovered aboard two vessels intercepted by the Italian Navy near the coast of Libya. The hashish was believed to have originated in Afghanistan and was bound for European markets. The operation was a success, and the seized drug shipment was estimated to be worth over $1 billion. At number 8, we have Operation Grit Rock, where 50 tons of marijuana were seized in the U.S. in 2013. Operation Grit Rock was a 2013 operation by the Drug Enforcement Administration that resulted in the seizure of over 50 tons of marijuana in the United States. The operation targeted Mexican drug trafficking organizations that were operating in the U.S. It resulted in the seizure of over 50 tons of marijuana, with a street value estimated at over $1 billion. The marijuana had been smuggled into the United States from Mexico and was destined for distribution throughout the country. The marijuana was seized in various locations in California, Texas, Arizona, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. The operation also resulted in the arrest of more than 200 individuals. At number 7, we have Operation Big Star, where 45 tons of marijuana were seized in the U.S. in 2007. Operation Big Star was a major drug bust in 2007 in the United States. During the operation, federal agents seized over 45 tons of marijuana, cash, and firearms. In addition, the investigation led to the arrest of more than 40 individuals and the seizure of over $2 million in cash. The operation was led by the Drug Enforcement Administration with assistance from other federal agencies, including the U.S. Marshal Service, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the U.S. Coast Guard, and the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The operation was focused on the border states of California, Arizona, and Texas, and resulted in the arrest of more than 250 people. At number 6, we have Operation Mallorca, where 44 tons of cocaine was seized in the Mediterranean in 2009. Operation Mallorca was a major drug-busting operation conducted by the Spanish Civil Guard in the Mediterranean Sea in 2020. The operation resulted in the seizure of 44 tons of cocaine with an estimated street value of 1.2 billion euros. The operation was conducted in collaboration with the Italian and French authorities, as well as Europol and Eurojust. The investigation was launched after the seizure of several small shipments of cocaine in the Mediterranean. The investigation led to the identification of a large criminal network involved in the illegal trafficking of drugs. The network had links to South American countries and was responsible for transporting the drugs to Europe. The seizure was the largest one in the history of the Mediterranean Sea. At number 5, we have Operation Conquistador, where 38.8 tons of cocaine was seized in Ecuador in 2008. Operation Conquistador was a major international law enforcement operation in Ecuador in 2008. The operation resulted in the seizure of 38.8 tons of cocaine, one of the largest drug busts in the world. The operation was conducted by the Ecuadorian National Police, the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, and the Colombian National Police. The cocaine was seized in multiple locations throughout Ecuador, including Guayaquil's coastal city, Quito's capital, and the port city of Manta. The drugs were believed to be destined for the United States and Europe. The operation also resulted in the arrest of more than 200 people and the seizure of over $1 million in cash. At number 4, we have Operation Kingfisher, where 28 tons of heroin were seized in Thailand in 2012. Operation Kingfisher was a joint law enforcement operation between the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration and the Royal Thai Police, which resulted in the seizure of 28 tons of heroin in Thailand in 2012. The operation began with the arrest of a major heroin trafficker in Thailand in October 2012. This arrest led to the seizure of more than 250 kilograms or 550 pounds of heroin and the identification of several other suspects involved in the trafficking of large quantities of heroin. Further investigations by DEA and RTP led to identifying a large heroin trafficking network operating out of Thailand. Ultimately, the law enforcement teams conducted a series of raids throughout Thailand, resulting in the seizure of 28 tons of heroin. This was the largest heroin seizure in Thailand's history, and one of the largest drug seizures in the world. The seizure disrupted a major drug trafficking operation and resulted in the arrest of 18 suspects. The DEA and RTP worked together to dismantle the organization and disrupt the flow of heroin into the region. At number 3, we have Operation Trifecta, where 20 tons of methamphetamine was seized in Mexico in 2011. Operation Trifecta was a major drug bust conducted by the Mexican Navy in May 2011. During the operation, the Mexican Navy seized 20 tons of methamphetamine and other drugs and weapons. The drugs were estimated to be worth $1.2 billion. This was the largest single seizure of methamphetamine in history. The operation also resulted in the arrest of 39 suspected drug traffickers. At number 2, we have Operation Princess, where 15.5 tons of cocaine were seized in the Caribbean in 1989. Operation Princess was a joint operation conducted by the Drug Enforcement Administration and the U.S. Coast Guard in the Caribbean Sea in 1989. During the operation, 15.5 tons of cocaine were seized from a freighter from Ecuador to the United States. The drugs were estimated to be worth over $500 million, and the seizure was the largest cocaine bust in the history of the DEA. In addition, the investigation was successful, resulting in the arrest of 7 individuals and the seizure of 3 vessels. And finally, at number 1, we have the infamous Operation Frozen, where 6.8 tons of cocaine were seized in Colombia in 2006. Operation Frozen was a joint operation between the Colombian National Police and the United States Drug Enforcement Agency, which resulted in the seizure of 6.8 tons of cocaine in Colombia in 2006. The operation involved a series of raids in the northeast of the country, near the border with Venezuela, and resulted in the arrest of over 150 suspected drug traffickers. The cocaine was valued at approximately $360 million and was one of the biggest seizures in Colombian history. Our final verdict: seizures of illicit drugs have been on the rise in the U.S. since 2015. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, global seizures of cocaine reached an all-time high in 2017. The majority of drug seizures occur at the U.S.-Mexico border. To all of you wondering what happens to all the seized drugs, here's what happens. Seized drugs are typically destroyed in a controlled manner. For example, they may be incinerated or disposed of in a chemical waste facility. In some cases, seized drugs may also be used for research or educational purposes. That's the end of our video today. Thanks for watching. For more such interesting videos, subscribe to our channel.
We want to turn now to a flood of drugs coming into this country at the U.S.-Mexico border. Record amounts of opioids, and along with them,
a major multi-drug operation worth $24 million busted in the Bronx today. Law enforcement say they seized more than 250 pounds of heroin, fentanyl, cocaine, crystal meth.
India's biggest heroin bust at the Mundra port in Gujarat. Nearly 3,000 kilograms of a banned narcotic substance, heroin.
Mexican authorities have confiscated 41.6 tons of marijuana on the outskirts of Tijuana, a major transport point for drugs destined for the U.S. market.
Drugs and highs have found a sweet solace in our environment. The manufacture and arrest of drug cases will forever remain with us as we get to discover them more and more till eternity is history.
Including 59 pounds of highly lethal fentanyl seized by Texas troopers the last 6 months.
If that almost 60 pounds of fentanyl had reached the streets and not been stopped,